Rabotai, we are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Arachaim and Siman Petet Hilchot Tefillah. The last Seif Het and of Kuf Chaf Amud Bet going to Kuf Chav Aleph of Dapei Mishna Berura. Maran writes, Bishat Adechak, when a person is in extenuating circumstances and you must daven earlier than normal, then you perhaps could do from Alot HaShachar. This is already mentioned in Masechet Brachot, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, that a person could sometimes, when he's Yotzeh B'She'ara, when the caravan is waiting on you, or in any other extenuating circumstance, a person could daven a little earlier than Netzach Hama. Even though that in Seif Aleph we wrote, this is really a second part of Seif Aleph, there Maran wrote that before Netzach Hama, it's B'di'evid. The tefillah of before Netzach Hama is B'di'evid, and we're going to see the ramifications of that on different choices that a person may have. But nevertheless, Maran himself writes in Seif Chet, Kegosh sarich lashkim lederech, you have to go out, you have a flight to catch. Yachol itpalel mishala amud hashachar. A person could daven early on, so long as it is after amud hashachar. Now, Chacham Ovadia has a tshuva in Chelik Bet of Yechavedat Siman Chet, in which he writes that people have to work early. Some people, depending if you're a bus driver, you can't wait until you daven with Netzach Hama. You have to be out and about. If you have your delivery service, or your baker, the bakers start early on. So some jobs require for the person to be out and about already before Netzach Hama. So Harvadia writes, or Letzion writes the same thing, his students in Chelik Bet Avor Letzion, that those are also tantamount to Yotzeh LaShe'ara, a person that's going out, Lashkim Laderech, and they are allowed to daven early on before Netzach Hama, so long as it is after Amud HaShachar. Yachol leitpalel misha'ala Amud HaShachar, v'yamtin milikrot kriyat Shema ad sheyagia zmana. So you wait for saying Kriyat Shema afterwards again until the time of Shema has arrived. And then the Rama adds over here in parentheses, if it's possible for you to say Shema when you're on the path, on the way, as we explained before in Hilchot Kriyat Shema, in Siman Nun Chet, we explained the first Siman in Hilchot Kriyat Shema, that a person, as long as they could have kavanah in the first pasuk, and we explained there in the Mishnah Berura, the first pasuk doesn't mean just Shema, it means also Baruch Shem, and according to many, it also means the first two psukim after Baruch Shem, when you start V'ahavta until Hayom, until the word Hayom, that needs kavanah, so you stand, you have kavanah, the first psukim of Shema, and then you could go on your path. That's not too much to ask. It's not like standing for 7-10 minutes and saying Shemona Esrei. It's just a few seconds of saying the first pasuk or psukim of Shema, and then you go on your path. That would be the right thing for him to do. Va'afal pi writes Maran, she'eno somech geula litfilah, even though that you're not somech geula litfilah, you don't end up doing semichat geula litfilah because you're not saying Shema in its proper time. You're davening early on, and you miss what the Gemara says, tremendous things in Daf Daled Amud Bet, Daf Hey, Masechet Brachot, of Kol HaSomech Geula Litfilah Shel Arid, is Muftach Lo Shu Ben HaOlam Haba. Gemara says tremendous things about the person that's careful to be Somech Geula Litfilah, that immediately after you say Gaal Yisrael, you run into Hashem's Fatay, and you're missing that. But nevertheless, this trumps that. Adif tfesh itpalel bebeto me'umad. It's more proper to daven with kavanah, properly standing and davening, mishitpalel bizmanav u'me'alech v'yismoch geula litfilah. Then davening when you're walking, when you're on the way, and your mind is not there, and then you get simichat geula litfilah. This actually happens to be very relevant for people who are frequent flyers. There's a shita of Rambam that a person should not be davening sitting. Should stand to daven Shemona Esrei. Harvadia went back and forth in this throughout his life. What's better? Is it better to daven bizman, right, and daven on the plane sitting down because they don't let you stand up, or is it better to daven afterwards and daven standing up properly. Now, many times there are ways to get around this. If you have you're one of those frequent flyers, sometimes you could get around this by just the means of doing it. It's all about timing, really. You have one of those students and they come to give the drinks. Sometimes you could just ask them before that I'm going to be going and putting this strange boxes in my body. I'm not strapping myself with a bomb or anything. Like, I'm just going to be praying, and they know it. Usually, especially if it's from East Coast, the places that they see from Jews, they know. And you ask them permission to stand for 5 minutes in the back, next to the door of the plane in the back, when the student's not there because they're serving the drinks. So you get them back there, and you daven. You could daven standing, and you could be just fine without having to daven sitting. So those are just planning it properly if a person is already put in that situation that they're flying in the time of tefillah. But nevertheless, Chavadia went back and forth on this, and later on in his life he became more stringent for a person not to daven sitting and be machmir for the shita of the Rambam and so on, which we're going to get to in the future simanim. But nevertheless, better to daven b'kavanah, standing up in your home, even though that you're doing it earlier than Netzach Hama, than do it afterwards when you're on the way, running and waiting for Shiara is waiting on you, and you're nervous and you're stressed, and so on. Now, writes the Mishna Berura, Shesarich ve'en Shiara mamtenet lo. It's talking about the case that the caravan is not going to wait for him, or any other extenuating circumstance that he's anus, that he has to daven earlier. Yeah, by the way, there's a machloket between Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul, students going his shita, and Chacham Obadia, whether or not it's better to daven b'yahid or betzibur, when the choices that you've got is daven betzibur before Netzach Hama in Minyan Po'alim, or daven biyachid after Netzach Hama if there is no other minyan. Imagine where you find yourself, there's only one minyan. And the minyan is a minyan po'alim. They daven earlier than Netzach Hama. You have a proper minyan, what's earlier than Netz. And the other alternative is daven biyachid with Netz or after Netz. What do? So Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli, Talmidim, write in his name that you daven betzibur and you don't miss the tefillah betzibur, so daven a little earlier. Chacham Obadia does not agree with that. He says no. Remember what Maran says in Seif Aleph, the tefillah before Netzach Hama is only b'di'evet. Tefillah betzibur is a chiyuv hishtadlut, the way we explained it, right? You are mechuyav to try to daven betzibur. It's a chiyuv hishtadlut. You're mechuyav, complete chiyuv, to try to daven betzibur. Now, you don't have a tefillah betzibur. That's l'chatchila. The only tefillah betzibur that you have is b'di'evet. So daven b'di'evet versus miss a chiyuv of hishtadlut, says Aradia, daven l'chatchila tefillah, because that's not part of your chiyuv hishtadlut to daven with a minyan that's b'di'evet. Like, it trumps the davening, a proper time of tefillah trumps the davening betzibur. Therefore, he does not agree with the assertion of Or Tzion in Chelek Bet that says daven betzibur earlier than Netzach Hama. Now writes the Mishna Berura, Perush b'stam derech eno yachol lechaven betfilah ben shu malech beraglav o yoshev ba'agala. Regularly, even if you're sitting on an agala, on a carriage, you can't really have that much kavanah. Even if you're on a ship and it's moving, and it's not a proper place that you're standing, davening like a mensch. Therefore, Chazal said it's not just why a person is walking on foot. Even if you're, sitting on a horse or sitting in a carriage or in a ship, still. Tov yoter shitpalel misha'ala amot hashachar, af she'eno adayin ikar zman tefillah. Better to daven a proper tefillah with kavanah, standing up without being disturbed, even if it's b'di'evet time of before Netzach Hama. And you are also going to miss the Smichat Geula Litfila, כי לא יוכל לקרוא אז קריאת שמע, because he can't say קריאת שמע yet, ועדיין לא הגיע זמנה, עד שיכיר את חברו ברחוק 400, because he can't say it until at least you have enough natural light in the sky that you could tell a person apart from another, as we discussed this before. מכל מקום זהו טוב יותר משתפלל בדרך בזמנו עם סמיכת גאולה לתפילה. Better do it earlier, but with kavanah, proper standing, than do it later and do geula litfilah, but not have so much kavanah and be just disturbed with what's going on around you. מכל מקום זהו טוב יותר משתפלל בדרך בזמנו עם סמיכת גאולה לתפילה, כי בביתו יוכל להתפלל בעמידה. You could stand, you could daven a proper Shemona Esrei, and that trumps the tefillah bizmana. Okay, Misha'ala Amut HaShachar. What does it mean from the time of Amut HaShachar? So he says, take a look at Berura Halacha. שכתבנו בשם הרבה פוסקים, דסבירה לו דווקא אחר שהאיר המזרח, וקודם לזה לא הגיע עדיין זמן תפילה. Amut HaShachar doesn't mean you see the first photon of light coming out. It means the whole Mizrach, the whole east is lit up with, you have like a hila of light covering the entire Mizrach. That's enough light. Again, this is in Masechet Yuma, Heira Mizrach, Chevron. There's different levels of light that are there. So, writes the Berura Halacha that we're talking about the case that already the east side of the horizon is lit up already with the sun coming up, and that's what the Oretzion also writes in Cherek Bet, that says because of this, he paskins that the workers, they have to go earlier on, and they need to daven early. They should not daven mamash by Alot HaShachar. Mamash by, you take a look at the calendar, it says Alot HaShachar, that means the first photons of the light that's coming out. So it says the Oretzion, don't daven mamash with Alot HaShachar, but you should wait a few minutes until it's Heira Mizrach, and the east side is a little bit more lit up. But again, from Chacham Obadia, you see that this is a case of ones, and therefore already from Alot HaShachar you could do it, and not just from Heira Mizrach. Now, Ibn Chacham Obadia talks about 6 minutes, 12 minutes after Alot HaShachar. So we're gonna discuss that Be'ezrat Hashem as we go on, of what exactly is the level of light that you need in the sky for davening. Ubifrat, writes the Mishnah Berura, kesherotze az levarech ala tefillin, when you want to say bracha on tefillin, and you're starting before Mishnah Yakir. We mentioned before the Mishnah Yakir is way after Alot HaShachar. So if you're starting those minyan po'alims, the workers minyan, they don't put on tefillin and talit before Baruch Sha'amar. They start their hodu and tefillah and Baruch Sha'amar and all of that. They usually go to Yishtabach. Then everyone pauses, because by then, hopefully, you've gotten to the time of Mishnah Yakir. Then they put on talit and tefillin, and they continue with Yotzer from there with talit and tefillin. Well, that we discussed already, whether or not you could say bracha in between Kaddish, before Kaddish, after the bracha of Yishtabach. Perhaps you do it with bracha even. We spoke about the Machloket, the Ramah, and Maran, so refer to that shiur in previous shiurim. Az levarech al tefillin, because when you want to say bracha on tefillin, then even according to the Mekilin, you have to wait. It's asur to say tefillin, the bracha on tefillin, until you have the time of Mishnah Yakir Chavero Berchok 400, which we discussed. ואם הגיע הזמן הזה, לכול העלמא יקרא קריאת שמע ויתפלל בביתו כתיקונה. And if you are already after the time of Mishnah Yakir, so the question is, well, I can't wait until Nets. I have to go out. I have to go to my flight. I have to catch my flight. But I could wait at home until it becomes Mishnah Yakir and then daven. That says Mishnah Berura, according to everyone, you should do that. According to everyone, you should prefer to daven at home, biyachid, after Mishnah Yakir, than davening, on the way when you have, disturbances but you're doing it properly, so to speak. You're doing it in the proper time of tefillah. So says the Mishna Berura, "Ve'imhu b'derech b'malon v'sha'era shelo omdim litpalel kodem ze hazman." If you are in a motel and your caravan is davening early, before this time, they're doing it too early. Umesha'er de'at barechu yagi hazman, and you assume based on their speed and when they're starting that until they say barechu, the time has come. Yuchal hu la'atchil birkat baruch she'amar gam ken imahem. You should start baruch she'amar with them. For now, without tefillin, or sheyilbash tefillin b'li bracha, or you wear your tefillin without bracha. Ve'achar sheyigia ben ishtabach liyotzer, when you finish ishtabach, right before yotzer, yireh im higia zman mashmesh b'ayim bivarech. Then you see if the time of tefillin and talit has come, Mishakir has arrived, then you move your tefillin a little bit or you touch it and you say bracha. The reason that you could touch it and say bracha, we explained this before, is because it's mitzvah memushechet. It's a continuous mitzvah. Usually, when you have done a mitzvah, you can no longer say bracha after it's done. Right? Kol mitzvot mevarech alehen over la'asiyatan. Every mitzvah, you have to say the bracha. Prior to if you did the mitzvah already, what bracha? But then you have the mitzvah that every second is a new mitzvah. Talit, every second that you wear it is a mitzvah. Tefillin, every second that you wear it is a mitzvah. It's mitzvah memushechet. Mitzvah memushechet, you could say bracha afterwards. So therefore, Maran wrote earlier on in Siman Chet, we had in Talit, that if you are going from home to shul early on in the morning, before the time of Mishakir, you wear your talit gadol without bracha, you get to the shul, you say bracha, you touch the tzitziyot, and you say bracha on it, and that's good. Now this has a lot of ramifications. For instance, one of them is, one of Chacham Obadiah's lifelong projects was to bring the minhag the Sfaradim back to what seems to be the Rambam Shcharuch of saying the bracha on Nerot Shabbat prior to lighting. Right? When you say candle lighting of Shabbat, the woman should say the bracha v'ladlik Nerot Shabbat and then light, not light and then say the bracha like Ashkenazim. Right? Now this whole thing is one of the understandings in Bahag, which the whole thing is based on, and so on. It's a very complicated sugya. Haravadia felt that this was a minhag ta'ut, and at some point he even went as far as saying that this is a bracha batala. Now, you have to talk about whether or not this becomes a bracha batala, because Nerot Shabbat also is a mitzvah memushechet. Every moment that you have light for Shalom Bayit in the house, the ambiance of Shabbat and so on, that is something that's of value. It's not that you just did it for 1 second and it's good enough. Every moment that you're awake and you're operating in the house, you need the light. So it would seem to be a mitzvah memushechet that at least would be not a bracha batala. But again, this is a question I had, and then somebody showed me that his son Rabbi Tzchak Yosef actually deals with this question in his Ein Yitzchak, the more recent sefer that he published, and this is a fascinating talk. You could go back and forth and talk about the lumdus of the sugya, but nevertheless, when it comes to talit and tefillin, says the Mishna Berura, you could put it on without bracha earlier on, and when it gets time for it, then you basically just touch it and you say the bracha, and you go on with that. And when it says hachi adif, the Mishnah Berura explains in the last words of Maran in this Seif, this Siman, that says it's preferable to do early on at home without Geulah Litfilah, because you could stand and daven properly. Says the Mishnah Berura, Verov ha'olam en nizharim bazeh. Most people are not careful in this. Ve'efshar mishum dunagin ke'idach poskim. It could be because the minhag has evolved and developed like the other poskim, the svira lehu, the misbach Geulah Litfilah adif. There are those poskim who hold semichat Geulah Litfilah is a big deal, and that is more important than davening standing up with kavanah at home. So daven on the way, even though that's not as proper situation and scenario, but you could at least do Simichat Geula Tefillah. So says Mishna, maybe that's the minhag. Minhag is like those poskim. Al ken mitpalelim b'derech im Simichat Geula Tefillah. Therefore, people do this, that they daven with Simichat Geula Tefillah. Now, the Kaf HaChaim writes the same thing as Mishnah Berura, that was the minhag. And he even adds to it, he adds a reason to this minhag, that the minhag is not like the Psak of Shulchan Aruch, surprisingly, even though the Sfardim usually follow the Psak of Maran. But here, the minhag has evolved not like that, because he holds, because of the Ariya Kadosh. Because the Arizal says that a person has to daven the entire Tefillah Kesidra. We spoke about this earlier on, if you remember, in Siman Nun Bet. We were discussing, switching things, skipping Pesukei Zimra, doing it afterwards, and so on. We spoke about this. The Ariya Kadosh holds that if you switch the order, you are messing with a whole ladder that is very organized and very properly set up. How you ascend the ma'alot of Kedusha, going from Olam HaAsiyah all the way up to Olam HaAtzilut, and then after the Shemona Esrei, you come down, descending order from Olam HaAsilut down to Olam HaAsiyah, and you don't want to mess the order, because it will be like, he even uses at some point a very strong language of he's very strong on this. And Kaf HaChaim says, therefore, you should not go with Maran's psak over here, you should go with what the Mishnah Berura says the minhag was, to daven in order, not skip the order, daven keseder, and even if that takes some effort to have kavanah, to be able to stand quickly and so on and so forth, you should do it in that way, not to switch the seder of the olamot, and that's something important. But Zat Hashem, we will be continuing the next Siman Tzadi in the days to come.